at this stage in Mikel Arteta's project at Arsenal, they should be winning things, and not just limited to the Premier League. I think one of the things that bought Jurgen Klopp time at Liverpool was he won the Champions League before he won the Premier League, and that kind of gave him even more credibility.
Welcome to EuroLeagues then. Plenty to get into on this one. This week we've had statement wins from some of the Champions League favourites. We've had major teams as well on the receiving end of massive scorelines. We'll be reflecting on all the latest Champions League action. We'll look ahead to Sunday's El Clasico as well, with just 2 points separating Real Madrid and Barcelona at the top of La Liga. That's after we discuss the proposed match between Barcelona and Villarreal in Miami being cancelled following player protests. With us this week is Guillem Balague, Mina Rzouki and James Horncastle. Hello, everyone.
You forgot something, Maz.
What did I forget?
No.
You forgot the initiation song from you.
Oh, no.
Debut on the EuroLeagues.
Honestly, you do not want me to sing, Guillem. That is the one thing we will establish
after
this hour. No,
you can stand on your.
But
you can stand on the table.
No. I'm not having this. I'm already being bullied in the opening minutes. We're moving on, and we're starting with the Champions League. I'm clearly going to have to have a firm hand with all of you this evening. Let's start with the Champions League. This match week actually set a new record: 71 goals scored. It became the highest scoring match week in Champions League history. Is it just a coincidence, or is there something in the air, or just something about the way that teams are approaching the competition this year, do we think?
I don't know. It felt pretty extreme, to be honest,
Yeah.
Maz. There were blowout scorelines in a lot of these games. They didn't look particularly even, which is surprising given some of the matchups. For example, Arsenal against Atletico Madrid. You know, I was surprised not only by that result, but also by the result that Napoli had in Eindhoven. So I don't know whether it's a combination of some clubs with the fatigue of the Club World Cup, some clubs as well going through the motions a bit, transitioning from one system to another, incorporating lots of new players, as is the case with Liverpool, as is the case with Napoli. And, you know, I mean, for the last few weeks, we've been talking about how this season in various different leagues, it's been a bit route one, lots of long throws, more physical, pretty ugly to watch, a lot of 0-0s in Italy. And instead, we got the exact opposite when the Champions League came around.
First of all, we have to say there's not enough evidence for anything. But that doesn't stop me having a theory about it, which is the following. Because of the difficulties of PSG, Manchester City and Real Madrid in the first year of the competition with this format, the goal difference has become huge. You don't play everyone. You just play a bunch of teams. And if you make one or two mistakes for whatever reason, your goal scorer is injured or whatever, your manager is not inspired, it could just get you into trouble. So goal difference is a huge thing. And after the first goal, you go for the second, you go for the third. I'll add two more things. The English sides are just killing everyone. They are fitter than anyone, and they just keep scoring. And third, which is another theory of mine, this fact that the strikers are getting one goal per game is not an accident. It's a trend that will grow. There's more and more goals because of how teams play, how they make mistakes in the build-up, how there is more individual coaching, how the coaches are very offensive, how there is a lot of man marking. All that benefits goals. So let's see, we need another 100 games to be able to see if this theory works or not.
But I thought you were going to go for some theory like, PSG set a bad precedent last season in which they didn't bother in the beginning matches and then just still made it through and then won the entire competition after a dismal start to their campaign in the Champions League. But obviously it was a lot more educated than that. It was interesting because I was going through some of the goals over the last 20 years in the leagues. And for example, like La Liga, in which they hit their peak when obviously they had, a great Luis Suarez, Lionel Messi, and obviously Cristiano Ronaldo. And then now it's just fallen down. And I wonder whether just having great strikers, whether it's Harry Kane, just so effective, Ekitike now for Liverpool, and Gyökeres, and whoever it is, there's just so many great forwards on show. And whether now football is just so on the front foot, where the number 9 is hugely in fashion at the moment. And I don't know, 8 games. Perhaps there's this desire to just go for it now and not necessarily be a cagey affair in which you're a little bit scared in home matches. And I don't know. I wonder if that's the difference. But you're right. We can't draw any conclusions so far.
Well, Guillem has had his theory, and he's also come out with his bold prediction last night on Match the Day. You were really stirring the pot here. English sides, of course, beating their opponents by an aggregate score of 19-2 in the Champions League this week. And that, of course, includes opponents like Ajax, Benfica, Atletico Madrid, as James was saying. And you said this on Match the Day, Guillem.
About time. Right. About time. With the money you've got, with having some of the best managers around, with some of the best youngsters around, and we mentioned Chelsea being a young squad, with a lot of very good decisions in the market, you're going to have 5 teams in the quarterfinals, 3 in the semi-finals, 2 in the final. Anything else, it's a failure.
Guillem, explain yourself.
Don't need to. Well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm going to use one figure that should just kill this argument, in my favour, of course. The Premier League spent in the summer £3 billion. La Liga, 581 million. The difference is huge. Serie A got to 1 billion. The difference is huge. And I'm not even talking net money. Net money, in the Premier League, they just don't care. So I'm sorry, but you have all that much money, you have all those players, you have all those managers. It's logical that the assumption is that the Premier League is going to win everything. And if they don't, it has to be seen as a failure.
James?
Yeah, to elaborate on that, Maz, I mean, you brought up 3 of the opponents that the English sides beat. So Ajax, Benfica, and Atletico. I mean, if we take Ajax and Benfica, over the last 2 decades, these are 2 great European clubs that have won, in Ajax's case, multiple Champions Leagues, or in Benfica's case, been to multiple finals. But the economic disparity between them and the rest has left them behind. You've almost have this kind of tertiary group of clubs now, which Ajax, Benfica, and you could say the Scottish clubs, like Celtic, for example, belong to. Now, when the Super League was proposed by Guillem's friend Florentino Perez, president of Real Madrid, Juventus's former chairman Andrea Agnelli, the fear I think that was driving that was that La Liga, Serie A, Bundesliga, Liga would become like the Portuguese league, like the Dutch league, like the Scottish league, in terms of the gap between them and the Premier League. And so, I agree with Guillem. Even though in an ideal world, ideas beat money, money gives you such a good chance of having good ideas yourself that, these scorelines should not necessarily be a big surprise. I'm totally on board with Guillem's argument there.
So I did the clickbait, and James did put the meat to the bone.
So if we're talking about which of the 2 English sides then that you expect to be in final, because I was quite surprised this week that the Athletics Opta-powered supercomputer gave Arsenal a 21% chance of winning the Champions League. So it's got them as the favourites at the moment. So are we saying Arsenal are in the final against a Manchester City, a Liverpool, who obviously got back on track last night?
Well, I think we could see definitely another all-Premier League final. And it's been a surprise that there haven't been more of those in recent years. I don't have the computing power that Opta do in my head, but Arsenal have certainly been trending that way. I mean, every year they have improved in Europe. It was saying something that having reached the quarterfinal 2 years ago, they then reached the semi-final. The disappointment when they didn't follow up their performance in the quarterfinal against Real Madrid, against PSG in the semi-finals, I think spoke volumes, really. And what gave me confidence that Arsenal could reach the final already last year was the balance that they had in the team, how few chances they give away against top sides. Now that they've added Gyökeres and more goals, I think it's natural to put that pressure on Arsenal, that expectation that at this stage, in Mikel Arteta's project at Arsenal, they should be winning things, and not just limited to the Premier League. I think one of the things that bought Jurgen Klopp time at Liverpool was he won the Champions League before he won the Premier League, and that kind of gave him even more credibility. So I think it should be Arsenal's time. Whether it is or not is the beauty of football. We just don't know.
Mina, your thoughts? I mean, our producer is an Arsenal fan, so he will be loving everything that James has just been saying about this is their moment.
Yeah, I got nervous when he was asking me all these questions about Arsenal. I had to start talking. Listen, I think it's always really hard in the sense that I think their focus has to be on winning the Premier League. And like James says, this is the year that I think they have to start winning things. And considering their form right now and the fact that they've addressed key problems within the side by having a striker, by having depth in the squad where they're not reliant either on Saka or Odegaard, but have different avenues to goal. Their strength in defense is one thing, but I think that experience matters, and it's about them showing up in clutch moments. They were unlucky last season. They lost out to the eventual winners, but they had a terrific campaign going forward. And I think that they really grew a lot and matured as a side. I do take issue a little bit with the way that Atletico played, so I don't want to cast too many judgments because I don't know what's going on with Atletico and the triple substitution that I think totally ruined the game in many ways. I think there was some panic there on behalf of Cholo Simeone, and we've seen that quite a lot recently, and in the sense that this isn't the first 4-0 thumping that they've had in the Champions League. They had it against Benfica. There's been quite a few, and if you look at their home record and away record in the Champions League over the last 4 or 5 years, it actually doesn't make for some pretty reading. So listen, last year we took a lot of strength from the way that Liverpool came into this campaign. It was they were top of the standings. They were brilliant going forward, and then they collapsed. So we don't know. Right now, we can make quick assessments as to who is looking really good. And I agree with Guillem, spending nearly $4 billion in the transfer market when the likes of Bundesliga, if you look at the net performance, actually made money because they sold more than they bought, means that we should be seeing a lot more Champions League finals being dominated by the English clubs, but we're not. And sometimes I think money is the death of invention, of fantasy, of creation. And there is a worry there that England has to change that at the moment. And I do think Arsenal are looking like the hottest prospect to go forward. But my belief is that perhaps they might dedicate a lot more to trying to win the Premier League title more than the Champions League.
On the way from wherever I was to wherever I am now, don't ask me where that is. I met 3 Arsenal players at different points of this trip, and the 3 of them came up with similar lines. Why is everybody saying that we need to win this year? Why is everybody saying that we are set-piece specialists and that's all? And all what I was saying back and thinking about that reaction is like, I'm sorry, but everybody's scared of you. And as such, everybody's creating a narrative that, number one, simplifies your success. You're a set-piece specialist. If you win, it won't be fair or it will be poor. And secondly, it is actually what you get when you're favorites, this impression that now you are, that's the what comes out from the media, you have to win. But I agree with James. There is a progression, absolutely. To actually win the Champions League is so hard that they could get to the final. They should be in the semi-finals with what they've got. Winning it is a completely different matter.
Wait, hold on, Guillem. So Arsenal players had asked you, why are they being expected to win this year?
Just fans were saying, why is everybody saying that? We want to be the nice guys that almost win. And if we win, it wouldn't be great.
But these are the kind of things, by the way, this is the kind of stuff that makes me think that Arsenal won't win. It's like if you go to Real Madrid fans, right? They're not saying to them, so why does everyone expect us to win the Champions League? They themselves expect that. They put the pressure on themselves, and they don't only that, they go forward thinking they're going to win that. I think these are the differences when you try to assess who is going to actually win the Champions League or who isn't, or who's going to win the Premier League or who isn't. It's the kind of belief that you have. And I wonder whether that's transmitted to the players or not, whether there is this feeling of, why is there all this pressure on us winning? Is it because Liverpool aren't doing the best in the start of the season? Is it because City have lost certain players and not? You should always go into the season thinking that you're good enough to not only wipe out the competition, but that you have what it takes, rather than being like, why does everyone think we're going to win this? And I do think that that's kind of the message that's always carried across with Arsenal, and that kind of atmosphere where it's, why we expected it, there's pressure here. There isn't that belief that we should. because it is. You can't just say that now. This is a side that has spent, if we look at net, yes, okay, Liverpool have spent 400 million, but actually Arsenal net-wise have spent the most in this transfer market. So yes, they should be going in this to win it, and they should be expecting themselves to win it, and they should accept the pressure and deal with it. And that's the only way that you can come out and think to yourselves, we deserve to be here. Because anything other than that rhetoric, I think, is only harming them.
I just think Arteta feels a little bit like Mina there. As in, he feels that around him, he doesn't get that kind of winning mentality that you require. So what does he do? He brings Andrea Berta, he brings Gabriel Heinze, and he brings a lot of people that don't care what people think, don't care about the outside world, if you like, but they are all winners. So he's been bringing not just people good at the jobs, he's been bringing people that are going to push Arsenal to that, the hardest step of all, isn't it? From almost winning to winning. And perhaps, because as Mina says, around Arsenal is that we just want to be the nice guys, just leave us alone, But now that you're about to win, we don't like you.
No, I mean, look, if they're happy being the nice guys and not winning, then so be it. They can define themselves like that. I mean, I think there are three reasons why everyone is pushing this expectation on them. One, it's been 21 years since they won the Premier League. It's all the way since 2006 that they reached the Champions League final. That's a long time either way. I think other clubs have got a much harder time for going that long without winning those two trophies. I think the other thing is where we're at in this Arteta project now. He's had time. Mina's alluded to the net spend, how much depth that they have now. And then I think after those, if we look at the last 3 years, everyone felt that if it's not going to be Pep Guardiola and Man City, it's going to be Arsenal and Mikel Arteta. And last year it wasn't. When City had their worst season under Pep Guardiola, Arsenal didn't take advantage. And I think that is where, now that we see there's Victor Gyökeres, now we see there's Zubimendi in midfield, now we see that they have all these options off the bench. I don't think we do just talk about them as being set-piece specialists anymore. I think we've got over that. I think we now look at them as the complete package. And as Guillem says, it's not only the additions that they've made on the pitch, it's the additions that they've made off the pitch in terms of replacing Edu with Andrea Berta, who comes from a decade of success at Atletico Madrid, with Gabi Heinze, a winner who's been a head coach in his own right next to Mikel Arteta. I think that is where the expectation comes from. And I don't think it's unreasonable.
We're going to talk about Napoli. PSV thrashing them 6-2 winners at home this week in the Champions League against the Italian champions. They were 3-1 up, PSV, before Napoli forward Lorenzo Luca was sent off in the 76th minute. They then scored 3 more before then Scott McTominay scored what turned out to be a consolation goal. I mean, there's loads to talk about from this game, but Mina, it was the Luca sending off. It was really strange this one.
Why? Because he was telling the referee, "Oh, I didn't mean it to be about me.
I
wasn't saying anything about you."
Pointing his head angrily at the referee. Some were saying he was calling the ref crazy. Some say he was suggesting the ball came off the defender's head and it should have been a corner. But there was lots of theatrics, and ultimately, therefore, maybe a silly red card.
Absolutely a silly red card, and one that shows you sort of the anger that was going through Arsenal, through Napoli's team at that point. But we can't really blame his sending off for the way that they capitulated. Listen, if we look at the record of Antonio Conte in this competition, it's become somewhat of a cliche. We always talk about it, right? Like, the best that he's ever managed was when he was at Juventus and he managed a quarterfinal. And I find it quite hard to say this is entirely his fault, considering that he does have several big absences within the squad, including first and foremost Rasmus Højlund up front, who offers them that vertical edge, Lobotka in midfield, Rahmani at the back. So there are all these absences they've had to deal with, which you have seen the fact that they've now conceding in every single game, at least for the last 7 or 8, which tells you defensively one of their strengths has always been that. What I do find interesting is the way that Antonio Conte always explains everything. Last season, there wasn't enough players, and he was right to complain about that. They did have a very thin squad at the time, and yet they won the league title, I guess, against the odds, if you like. There was even a game in which he turned around to his assistant and said, "Who do I put on?" Because he just didn't have any players enough in the squad. And now he's saying that he's bought in 9. It's almost too much, right? It's almost too much for him. But Boban, speaking on Italian TV at the time, responded saying, this is just a very strange excuse to say that you can't find the chemistry because you brought in too many players over the summer, when none of these players are playing except Kevin De Bruyne. That's the guy that you have put in midfield, where you have tried to adjust the tactics to suit his insertion into that midfield. And so we can only focus on that. You can't keep talking about all these new players coming in, and it takes time to find the right chemistry, the right alchemy within the squad. And Kevin De Bruyne seems to be sort of the tough spot. Is he helping this team, or is too much of the game sort of revolving around making a place for him? And another thing that I would say is losing Lobotka and putting in Gilmour. It's not a like-for-like replacement. There was just no defensive filter. The defensive line was completely exposed. And Napoli have just not been looking like themselves.
I mean, I'm going to come to Antonio's defense, and I'm going to frame it in one of the chats we've already had that Guillem was talking about, how, sort of Pep and Mikel Arteta, they look at the expectation around them and the pressure that it brings. And that is a pressure that ultimately has come from their own success, right? Antonio Conte always likes to say, "I'm condemned to win," because that's all I do. In his 6 years in coaching in Italy, he's won the league 5 times. With 3 different clubs. And so naturally, the expectation comes, Antonio, you always win leagues, but what about the Champions League? And look, the thing with it, Napoli do not have a winning tradition in this competition. They don't have a winning tradition in European competition, full stop. You only have to go back to the UEFA Cup that Diego Maradona won in 1988. That's the only time they've won a European trophy. And what I'll give Conte credit for is, in his year off between getting the sack at Tottenham and getting the Napoli job, he went away and studied a lot. And he was like, you know what, football has changed and I need to change with it. And, when he got the Napoli job, he looked at the players he had and he basically said, that 3-5-2 that's worked for me since I've been at Juventus, it's not going to work with these players. I've got Kavisha Kvaratskhelia. I need to play something else. So, in the 6 months that they had Kvaratskhelia before he went to Paris Saint-Germain and won the treble, plays 4-3-3, kept doing that. They signed Kevin De Bruyne in the summer. He's like, right, I need to find a way to get Kevin in the team as well, but I can't get rid of any of the 3 midfield players who helped win me the league last year. So I'm going to come up with something different. We need to be more attacking. And he's part of this trend that Guillem was alluding to about offensive-minded coaches. And Conte is trying to move with the times. Now, moving with the times won in the league last year with Napoli, but he's trying to do this in the Champions League as well. And, I felt he was unlucky in the first game of the Champions League against Man City. Di Lorenzo gets sent off 1v1 with Haaland. It was then he thought he was going to lose a game 6-2. Because he was down to 10 men after 20 minutes at the Etihad. So he was really proud of his players that they only lost 2-0. 2 of the 3 games they've had a man sent off. I think if you look at the goals that they conceded against PSV Eindhoven, you've got own goals, worldies, and the guy gets sent off. It doesn't excuse that they've conceded 6 for the first time since 1997. But I think...
But you are excusing it. But you are sort of saying, as in many ways, that look, I take your point in the sense that he is not entirely to blame for this, but do you not think there's always some emotional collapse going on all the time? And isn't that his fault when his
No,
you
I
don't think there was an emotional collapse in that particular match when it looks like the team just kind of lost their bearings at that point and weren't responding in the way that they had enough on the pitch to win against this PSV side. They had the technical quality. There were no inside runs. They weren't trying to find ways in which they could beat a team that plays high tempo, aggressive, overwhelming style pressure and try to beat it with the technical choices, like with the technical brilliance of your own squad. And I think that he said, well, we can't match them, and sort of almost the team gave up in that point.
Can I find common ground between you two? Because you're both right, and you're both saying one thing that is the same. Yes, they collapsed, yes, it's very difficult to win when you haven't won in European football. And it is not by chance that we see the same teams, right, getting to the semifinals and the finals. And it is a long list of things that makes you win in Europe or makes you be candidate in Europe, which Napoli haven't got. And it's got to do with players that have done it before, managers that have done it before, fans that have done it before and know that they concede 1 or 2 is not the end of the world. Pressure to referees, that conversation you have on the way up to the halftime to the changing room with the referee, maybe not your manager, maybe your director, the Juventus of this world, the Real Madrid of this world. They know how to do all of that.
Guillem,
yep.
I was at the Bernabeu last night for Juventus Real Madrid, and I don't know whether this is a new thing at the Bernabeu, but when the visiting team steps off the bus, as they walk into the Bernabeu, they are confronted by all of the Champions League trophies that Real Madrid have won.
Not by chance.
Not by chance. And the players and the officials from the opposite can't help themselves but stop, stare, and then it really hits them that, oh, okay. I mean, yeah, even just being in the press stand last night, I felt like I could win the Champions League, being sort of
in that
environment.
Probably could at Madrid.
Real Madrid, which is, I don't know what the role is in England, but is the guy that looks after those that come, the directors that come over, or the referees that come over. The delegate is a former referee. And he is the one welcoming the referees. And he makes sure that the referees go that way as well, of course. And he would probably go like, yeah, this is the Champions League we won in 1955. This is the one in 56. This is one. So yeah, just a reminder, all that counts.
Yeah, it does.
So we've talked about Napoli. Let's talk about Juventus on the end of a second successive defeat last night, Real Madrid beating them at the Bernabeu. Is this, again, James, a sign of of where Juve are at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, to pick up on what Guillem was saying about clubs having an aura about them, Juventus have had that aura. They had an aura for much of the last 15 years. That aura has been flickering for some time. Almost it's been switched off, really. And I think, part of that, comes from the choices that they made when they last went to the Bernabeu in 2018 for this quarterfinal tie in the Champions League. Everyone remembers it because Ronaldo scored that incredible bicycle kick in the first leg in Turin, got the standing ovation. Juventus almost came back from 3-0 down in the second leg, 3-3, and then Ronaldo gets a penalty, scores it. Real Madrid knock Juventus out. And a few months later, Juventus decided to sign Cristiano Ronaldo. And when I say that that decision changed everything for Juventus, it's not to blame Cristiano Ronaldo for Juventus paying the fee that they did and paying the salary that they did. But there are only 2 ways that was going to work for Juventus. If Ronaldo delivered a Champions League and if COVID didn't happen. Because the two combined in terms of the money they were paying for Ronaldo and COVID happening, it basically turned the club into a financial spiral that they haven't been able to get out of. It led to the resignation of their chairman, Andrea Agnelli. And I think when you don't have an Agnelli in the office every day, a representative of the family who's owned that football club for more than 100 years, who is there setting standards for that club, it means they drift. And they're still run by the Agnelli family. The Agnelli family has spent a lot of money in the last 5 years trying to get them back to where they should be. But without a strategic direction, that money has been poorly spent. There's a lack of stability at the club, and there's a lack of identity at the club, which is why Juve at the moment don't really feel like Juve.
I've always had this issue when it comes to discussing about why teams, whether it's coaches or the players, it's always about who you have in management. And losing Beppe Marotta for me was one of the biggest mistakes that I think Juventus ever did. They didn't think that he thought big enough for where they were at the time. He went to Inter and obviously took them to 2 Champions League finals in much the same way that he did at Juventus. So yes, he was one of those consequences of that Ronaldo deal because he didn't want it to happen. But at the moment, then what you have is a lot of people who've come in with egos, whether it's Giuntoli, who wanted to make a splash by coming in and doing a lot of deals that was going to impede them financially because he wanted to win straight away. And then you've got now Comoli, who I think has already made quite a few mistakes, even though he's very well loved within those Juve headquarters and probably going to be their new CEO. But then you look at sort of some of the transfers they've made, which obviously Igor Tudor is not very happy with at all. That was one of the comments he threw out over the weekend, in the sense that Cesc Fabregas was allowed to choose his players at Como, whereas he didn't have that opportunity. This is, bear in mind, the same guy who at Lazio quit because he wanted to change 8 or more players within that side. So this is a man who is, much like Antonio Conte, always wants to have a say in the transfer market. Is he the right man to have bought in to coach Juventus? And then you look at the whole Elkan. So Elkan is the owner, right? And look at the way that Ferrari is being run in Formula One, and some of the madness of the strategy mistakes, the fact that they are upset when Charles Leclerc says anything bad to his engineers. That's become a mess for a long time now, Scuderia Ferrari. And Juventus has gone down that route as well. So you have to start questioning the ownership and whether the people within this club actually are, being just bought in. Best in class, Giuntoli was best in class, a little bit of Manchester United, Comodi. But do they actually have partnerships up top in which people are talking to each other and creating this sort of system in which they're properly analyzing who is coming in, whether they are worthy of the jersey, whether there are specific ideals as to why you're buying them? Marotta specifically said at the time, I'm buying Vidal because of these reasons. I'm buying Carlos Tevez because I think he has a point to prove. I think there's a psychological burden there that he's got a point to prove. He always had a reason for the players coming in. That doesn't seem to be that way anymore when you're buying Openda and David, and then you've already got Vlahovic. It just kind of seems like they're just wasting money at this point. It's not even a lack of funds at the moment. There just seems to be no clear direction. We say that every year. And the fact that the fans were just hopeful that it wasn't a huge hammering by Real Madrid goes to show you that it's a little bit of Arsenal's fans, it's gone. That aura is gone completely. Even the fans are just hoping for a narrow win now, not even a win against Real Madrid, which they've managed before.
There is few things more pleasing than a big giant like Juventus losing, because then you get the emotional and deep analysis that we're getting from James and Mina about why this is happening. But if it wasn't for Courtois yesterday, and everything you said is true, but if it wasn't for Courtois yesterday, Juventus could have won last night. Vlahovic 1v1 against Courtois doesn't save it. The way Juventus were defending and Real Madrid couldn't attack that defense, they could have beat them. Now it is, of course, 7 games without a win. But football is fun, isn't it?
Well, Mina talked about Como and Cesc Fabregas. We have to mention them, Guillem. One of the sides, of course, beat Juve this week as well. Newly promoted, 1-2-0, beating Juventus on Sunday. 6th now in Serie A. I mean, Coach Cesc Fabregas knows what he's doing, right?
Yes, I keep bringing into my head the first time that I saw him. You must remember him as a 16-year-old when he first arrived to Arsenal, and he had that strange haircut where he left like a little bit of hair growing to one side, not really having a reference in the world for that, and didn't even know what he was doing. That shy guy who was living in a room in a 4-bedroom place in the north of London, who could spend the whole afternoon with you playing pool because there was not much more to do, who got really nervous every time he went into the forums at the time. They were called forums, to look into what people were saying of him, and how the rest of the following 10 years, his focus was only him. I took him to do the first photo shoot, and there was clothes that came in from a famous brand. And at the end, he went to me and said, "Can I keep the clothes?" "Yes, Cesc, you can." That Cesc, who spent, as I said, 10 years just thinking of himself, all of a sudden is thinking of 25 people, 25 Cescs. And not just that, he's learned from a lot of coaches, Pep Guardiola, Jose Mourinho, both extremes, but he's not Pep Guardiola. He's not Jose Mourinho. I think he's Mikel Arteta. So he picks from one and the other, and one day he's defending deep and he's got no problem doing that. Another day it's a counter-attack, another day he dominates. So he makes his teams flexible from that point of view. But perhaps the thing that impresses me the most is those clips that Como keep bringing of him surrounded by his players at the end of the game, speaking in perfect Italian about what it meant to win, what it meant to the fans and to themselves, and what a leader he is. And I keep thinking of that guy with that bad haircut. And I thought, what happened? What an evolution.
I think you're talking about the era of MySpace as well back then as well, aren't you, Guillem? Maybe with that. Wow. Oh, yeah, that takes me back. I mean, what's also interesting about Fabregas at Como is he's got links to the club like no other head coach. We were talking about the emotional link with Sean Dyche this week at Nottingham Forest, somewhere that he knows very well as a player. But Fabregas is a part owner of Como. So that it really is in his heart, in his soul in that sense. And also, it's going to be difficult in that way then for other clubs to try and poach him.
Yeah, I mean, it's Arsenal by the lake, Maz, really. No, because you've got sort of the Deans involved. So, yeah, David Dean, who was chief executive of Arsenal when Arsene Wenger was there, and when Cesc was a player. You've got Titi Henry, and all of these guys were at the Juventus game. And it was really nice because Cesc had been sent off in the previous game, so he couldn't be in the dugout, and he really wanted to be in the dugout, I think. But when his old boss Arsene Wenger was there in the stands, instead he was up in the gods coaching. But they had an hour before the game, just sort of catching up, talking about football, and it did make me think. I mean, Guillem's made that Mikel Arteta comparison there, but when I see Cesc and the intensity with which he works, and Guillem referenced those post game where he gets a huddle together, talks to the players, and then they go under the curva and basically take the applause from the fans, thank the fans. It's not very Wenger-like. It's not quiet leadership. It's not making subtle adjustments here or there. Cesc is in control of everything. And, what's really impressed me about him is his adaptability over the last 2.5 years. He's gone in there into Italian football, really humble, willing to learn. When they're a second division team, he recognized that he didn't have the players to play in the way that he had in his head. And he accepted that. And he played for the circumstances that he was facing with the players that he got at the time. Obviously, they've been promoted since. They've invested heavily. They've adapted the team. I remember when they got up last year, the first thing was to bring in experience. Pepe Reina, Alberto Moreno, Sergio Roberto. And then halfway through the year, they were like, actually, no, I need something else. And they went back into the market, and everything that they did to tweak the team and make them more effective, more competitive, it worked. And, I think he's a top manager. You can see that already. You can see that in the job offers he had in the summer, where, Inter, for example, came in for him. And, if he wasn't a part owner of Como, he probably would be there now. I mean, I think the owners of Como were delighted he was a part owner, because they're like, Cesc, sorry, you can't go and coach Inter. That's a massive conflict of interest. Do you want to sell your shares? So there you go. But Cesc, super impressive communicator, super adaptable. I think, when Mikel Arteta moves on from Arsenal, when Pep Guardiola moves on from Man City, he will already be a candidate for those jobs.
I mean, well, Arsenal on the lake, as James is saying, Mina, Fabregas saying after that win over Juventus, we work a lot on set pieces because they can help you win games. I mean, that is so Arsenal.
I mean, he's making the case for it as well. But I'm trying really hard not to be a Debbie Downer, but I kind of feel like what James does is just create this beautiful story, and then I just don't want to come in and be like, wow. But I also think, so I agree, listen, the way that he's learned on the job, the way that he has produced a side in which I think that they were sort of criticised for being a bit reckless at the start of Serie A because of their style of play. But there has been a lot of investment in that side. They've brought in a lot of players, and that's made a difference. I think their home record was fantastic last season, but there was a lot to be said about their performances away from home. But this year, you can see how much the side is developing and actually taking on these instructions. But there isn't that kind of pressure. I mean, they are what, the biggest spenders, net spenders, fourth overall in gross. But money isn't everything, right? It's about the ideas that you have. And one thing that you could tell what they did over the weekend against Juventus is that they played like a team that understands exactly what they're supposed to be doing. And Juventus have spent a lot of money too, but they have no idea what they're doing. So that's a lot to be said for Fabregas and the way that he's managed to get into the minds of these young guys and converted them into superstars. Really, the performances of Nico Pass are out of this world at the moment. And seeing the way that he's developed him in a way that Yildiz, for example, the person who was his opposite at Juve, isn't and played in out of position, goes to show you how much Fabregas makes that difference for Como in a way that other coaches are not making the difference for their teams.
Cesc to Arsenal, Vincent Kompany, Manchester City, Xabi Alonso, Liverpool.
Yeah.
I'm seeing it.
Are we starting this
It's
now?
going to happen. Former players fighting against each other in the Premier League. It'll happen.
Guillem, we've got to talk about what's happened in Spain this week. This proposed La Liga match between Barcelona and Villarreal in Miami in December, cancelled following these player protests across La Liga last weekend. Players refusing to move for the first 15 seconds of their match. I mean, Villarreal said they've been shown a complete and utter lack of respect by the timing of the announcement just before their Champions League game against Manchester City on Tuesday. Xavier Tebas, president of La Liga, saying Spanish football has lost an opportunity to advance. I mean, is he right, or does it feel like cancelling this game is in fact the best possible outcome?
No, what it feels is that Javier Tebas didn't manage to convince everyone for this to take place. So Relevant, who they've calculated they could earn £2 billion in 15 years by having one game of La Liga in the States or abroad, will continue talking to Tebas, and Tebas will continue trying to take place. But then they have to convince everyone, and quite clearly, as you said, number one, the players basically was a mini strike. And because it was a strike, La Liga is saying you could be punished for doing this because that was not a legal strike. But the players quite clearly were the ones who stopped this, and Real Madrid stopped this as well. Real Madrid used their connections with the government, and Real Madrid, who are having a war with Tebas and La Liga, put the pressure to Relevant. And basically, you heard the day before and the same day when it got cancelled, Carvajal and Courtois, a very well-rehearsed speech about why it wasn't a good idea. That's the official line of Real Madrid. All that pressure put together meant that Relevant thought, this is not the right time. This is not the way to do it. But I do feel, and this goes against the opinion of 100% of the fans in the world, perhaps, that is an opportunity for Spanish football to find another avenue to challenge. We said the figures before of the money that's been spent from the Premier League. Would you let us just try something different to see if it works or it doesn't? And people will tell you, yeah, but clubs belong to the community. It's only one game. And by the way, you see many people saying it distorts the competition. You know what also distorts the competition? Barcelona playing the first 3 games away because they've got a stadium they cannot open. Or the pressure that Real Madrid, through Real Madrid TV, put to the referees on a personal level. That also distorts the competition. One game away, which as we know, other sports do it, doesn't distort the competition. And it opens up a new avenue. It may not work, but why not try it?
James?
Yeah, I think leagues have to take risks, particularly those outside the Premier League, because the Premier League, to its credit, has spent the last 30 years going around the world selling itself better than any other league, so that even when it wasn't the best league in the world, it was remunerated like the best league in the world. And the gap is now so great that if you look at the international broadcast rights that the Premier League gets, it's bigger than the domestic rights that they get here in the UK. And all that means is that broadcasters outside of England who are showing the Premier League, well, all of their budget is going on the Premier League. There's no budget left for La Liga. There's no budget left for Serie A. There's no budget left for Bundesliga. Bundesliga in this country is doing watch-alongs with a YouTuber, trying to do something different to get to an audience. And you know, I think that is ultimately why La Liga and Serie A are trying to do this, to try and take a game abroad, to be different, to generate a different revenue stream, and maybe create a new generation of fans who decide, because their team, because two teams have come to Miami or Perth in Western Australia, and they have a childhood memory of going to watch AC Milan Como or Villarreal Barcelona, that they might stay connected with those clubs and talk about those clubs to their friends. And in the long term, it has some sort of effect. My take on, I'm not anti this. What I would say is I don't think it will close the gap between the Premier League and the rest. I think this is about Serie A and La Liga trying to be first at something and trying to be the best of the rest, if that makes sense.
I feel like Rabiot and Guillem and James are the chief of the Italian FA telling me to shut up and respect the laws of globalization.
Because I remember Mina, talking about this on the World Service a few weeks ago around that Serie A game in Perth, and you saying, unlike the situation in La Liga, that match will go ahead in Perth.
Yeah, that will go ahead. And look, I get it, right? You have to try to make money in any way that you can. This is something that is especially being pushed by AC Milan and owners of Redbird. But I do think that for me, there is a huge difference. I do think there is a case to be made where that's probably not where you should start if you're trying to be a globalized league, in the sense that if you walk into Serie A office, for example, the one if you walk into one in the Middle East or anywhere, there's nobody around. They don't make these offices don't even try to make it an environment in which Serie A is being accepted abroad. They're not putting in the money or the budgets in these offices to try to get fans to engage. They want to spend no money in these offices, and then they don't try to, and then they want to take a game abroad to Perth. It makes no sense to me, because I feel like there's no baby steps in trying to make it easy for fans to connect with Serie A, but instead want to play this game. I think if you gauge what's going on in social media, even American fans were really happy about this game being cancelled. I don't know if this is just a social media thing, but
we are rapidly running out of time. Guillem, very, very quickly before our time is up, just talk to us about El Clasico, the first of the season on Sunday afternoon. Real Madrid against Barcelona, first against second. Real on 24 points, Barca on 22. It couldn't be set up better.
No, it's played in Madrid. It probably won't mean a lot, but losing the Clasico, it's a defeat that lasts for months, and it will be a Bellingham that starts to look good. Scored, of course, against Juventus, but still a little bit lost in the way that Real Madrid plays, because they haven't found the perfect combination in the middle and how to link with the forwards, but they're getting better. Barcelona, on the other hand, they find that the forwards are not pressuring enough. We haven't seen Rafinha, Lewandowski and Lamine enough because of injuries. So again, it will be an opportunity for Rashford to shine. 5 goals, 6 assists. He's doing very well with the ball. Without the ball, he's got to work harder. So there's going to be gaps. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be a lot of fun, I feel. And because it doesn't terribly matter what happens, I think they'll go both of them will go for it. So it's one not to miss.
That is it for this edition of the EuroLeagues. Thanks very much, guys. James Horncastle, Guillem Balague and Mina Rzouki with us on the show this week. The EuroLeagues will be back at 9 o'clock on 5 Live next Thursday with Alistair Bruce Ball.
The Football Daily Podcast on BBC Sounds.